A widowed billionaire observed a nanny breastfeeding his infant, and his subsequent actions would irrevocably transform not only her life, but his as well. Within the hushed opulence of the mansion, the plaintive cries of a 2-month-old infant reverberated like a raw wail piercing the stillness. For an extended period, no one responded. The employed nanny had vanished. The billionaire remained engrossed in his work within his office, while the baby's voice dwindled into weakness. Downstairs, a young black woman named Naomi Clark repeatedly scrubbed the same expanse of marble floor, her thoughts distant from the pail beside her. Each sound emanating from upstairs intensified the tightness in her chest, rendering her breathless. It had been 6 weeks since she lost her own newborn son. 6 weeks since she had last held a small, warm form close to her heart. Ever since that night, the cries of any baby fractured something within her. She murmured softly, "Please cease crying, little one." However, her voice was overwhelmed by another desperate lament from the nursery. Naomi pressed her hands to her ears, her eyes stinging. Yet the sound now seemed to originate from within her own chest. The confines of the grand mansion felt constricting. The opulent lighting, the gleam of polished furniture, the pervasive silence of wealth. None of it could obscure the anguish that echoed through the halls. Upstairs, baby Noah lay in his crib, his tiny face flushed and slick with perspiration. His lips were parched, his mouth feebly seeking sustenance that was absent. The bottle situated nearby had soured, its scent permeating the room. Amber Lewis, the nanny, had departed hours earlier, citing a need to purchase new formula, but had never returned. She was presently at the mall, engaged in conversation with friends, and shopping for items far exceeding her financial capacity. In the office below, David Miller, the billionaire father, sat before a screen adorned with business charts and figures. His tie was loosened, his countenance pale from exhaustion. He had not truly slept since his wife Clara passed away during the birth of their only child. Each night, he labored until dawn, pursuing success as an escape from the quietude that served as a constant reminder of her absence. The cries from upstairs penetrated even his closed door. His hand hovered over the keyboard. For a fleeting moment, he contemplated rising to check on his son, but the ongoing meeting with investors in Japan occupied his attention. Voices called his name. "Mr. Miller, are we prepared to proceed?" someone inquired. David blinked, compelling himself to respond. "Yes, continue." Yet, the crying persisted. Downstairs, Naomi dropped her cleaning cloth. Her heart pounded, and her legs moved instinctively before her mind could fully process her actions. She ascended the stairs, one hand gripping the banister, her lips whispering, "Please, God, let the baby be well." Her breath grew labored as she reached the nursery door. Pushing it open, she froze at the sight before her. Baby Noah lay listlessly in the crib, his eyes partially closed, his breathing shallow, his skin afflicted with fever. His small fists clenched and unclenched as if reaching for assistance. Naomi hurried forward, gently lifting him into her embrace. His diminutive body felt hot, trembling, and so feather-light it unnerved her. The spoiled milk bottle slid from its support and struck the floor with a muted thud. Naomi's heart hammered against her ribs. Oh no, please, not again," she whispered, her hands unsteady as she cradled him. The infant's lips moved weakly, searching for something absent. In that pivotal instant, something within Naomi awakened. She recalled the evenings she used to nurse her own son, the gentle breaths against her chest, the solace only a mother could provide. Her arms trembled as she comprehended that her body was still capable. 6 weeks had elapsed since her profound loss, yet her body continued to produce milk. She had implored for it to cease, but now, perhaps, this was the reason it had not. Tears welled in her eyes. She sank into the armchair beside the window, holding Noah close. "I am so terribly sorry, little one," she murmured, her voice cracking. "I cannot bear to lose another child, not tonight." With hands that quivered, she unfastened her blouse just enough to bring him near. The infant instinctively found her warmth and latched on. The room fell into a profound silence. For the first time in hours, Noah ceased his crying. The only sounds remaining were the faint, steady rhythm of his breathing and the soft murmur of Naomi's tears falling onto his blanket. She held him more tightly, rocking him gently, her entire being relaxing as she felt his returning strength. In that moment, she forgot the mansion, her employment, the the world beyond. All that existed was a hungry child and a heart steeped in grief that had discovered a reason to continue beating. Minutes stretched into hours. The infant drifted into slumber, his small hand clutching her blouse. Naomi gazed down at his tranquil countenance, and her heart ached with a mingled sensation of love and sorrow. "You are safe now," she whispered, brushing a tear from his cheek. "You are safe." However, the sound of approaching footsteps then echoed from the hallway. Heavy, deliberate, each step drawing closer than the last. Naomi froze, her breath catching in her throat. She looked toward the door as it creaked open. David Miller stood there. His eyes widened at the sight of her holding his son, her blouse partially unbuttoned, the baby sleeping peacefully against her. The light from the window illuminated both their faces, creating an image that words could not adequately convey. For a protracted second, David remained motionless. His mind struggled to reconcile what he was witnessing. The silence in the room grew more intense. Then, his voice emerged, low and raspy. "What are you doing?" Naomi gasped softly, clutching the baby closer, as if fearful of him being taken away. Her face turned ashen. "Sir, please, I can explain," she stammered, tears welling anew. David advanced, his expression inscrutable. A part of him yearned to unleash an outburst, to demand an explanation, yet another part acknowledged what his intellect refused to dismiss. His son was at peace for the first time in days. The crying had ceased, the feverish flush on the baby's face had subsided. Naomi's voice trembled as she spoke. "The milk was spoiled, sir. He had a fever. I couldn't stand by and watch him perish." David's jaw tightened. He looked from her to the infant and back again. Words eluded him. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, laden with confusion and emotion. For a moment he turned away, attempting to rein in the turmoil brewing within him. Naomi remained seated, trembling, uncertain of what might transpire next. Her hands held Noah tightly, fearful that releasing him would mean relinquishing another piece of her heart. The clock ticked audibly in the ensuing silence. Outside, the sky darkened and a gentle rain began to fall. The house stood still, suspended between judgment and an act of mercy. And in that profound quietude, both Naomi and David understood that whatever followed would usher in a fundamental change. The rain outside the mansion intensified, its droplets tapping softly against the glass like a harbinger of impending sorrow. Naomi Clark sat frozen in the armchair, her arms still encircling baby Noah, her blouse now partially fastened, her hands quivering. Opposite her stood David Miller, the billionaire whose face registered a complex mix of anger, confusion, and disbelief. The silence between them was palpable, almost suffocating. Naomi opened her mouth to speak, but her voice faltered before any words could be formed. "Sir, I understand how this appears," she whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. "But he was close to death. I swear I only wanted to help." David gazed at her for a prolonged period, utterly silent. His thoughts were a tempest. He saw his wife's visage in the framed photograph on the wall, her warm smile, her vow to raise their son together. Then he looked at Naomi, this woman who had just transgressed a boundary beyond the comprehension of anyone within his social sphere. "You fed my son," David finally stated, his voice low and resonant, "without my permission." Naomi flinched as if struck by his words. "He had a raging fever," she said softly. "He couldn't breathe, he was starving, and the milk in the bottle was spoiled. I did what was necessary to keep him alive." David ran a hand over his face, pacing back and forth. His intellect wrestled with a duality of gratitude and resentment. His heart acknowledged that his son was safe due to her actions, but his pride resisted yielding. The established tenets of wealth, power, and societal expectations asserted themselves more forcefully than his burgeoning emotions. Finally, he turned to her once more, his voice betraying a slight tremor. "You should have contacted me. You should have waited." Naomi's tears flowed freely now. Quote, "In one," she repeated softly. Quote, "two." The resonance of her words filled the room like a sacred invocation. For a fleeting moment, David's expression softened, but he quickly averted his gaze. "You may go downstairs," he said after a significant pause. "I will summon the physician." Naomi hesitated. "Please, sir, he is asleep now. Let him rest." David's tone turned frigid. "Leave, Naomi." Her lips trembled, yet she complied. She tenderly placed Noah in his crib, her hand gently caressing his tiny chest. "I sleep well, little one," she whispered through her tears. Then she stepped back and departed the room, her heart fracturing with each retreating step. Once she was gone, David stood over the crib, observing Noah's soft breathing. For the first time in weeks, a sense of peace had settled upon his son's countenance. Yet, within David's chest, guilt and bewilderment waged a fierce battle. He sat down on the edge of the bed, covering his eyes with his hand. The image of Naomi holding Noah refused to recede from his mind. It was not an image of transgression, but one of profound affection, the very kind he had not witnessed since his wife's passing. In the ensuing hours, whispers began to circulate through the mansion. Amber Lewis, the nanny who had abandoned her post, returned later that evening. Upon learning of the events, her eyes widened in astonishment. Quote, "1," Amber exclaimed. One of the maids nodded nervously. Quote 2. Amber forced a laugh, but her heart filled with a potent mix of jealousy and apprehension. She had neglected the child for hours, yet now the attention would inevitably shift to Naomi, the woman who had performed her duties. Quote, Amber muttered under her breath. Quote, E4. By morning, the gossip had disseminated far beyond the mansion's confines. Neighbors gossiped over garden fences, and staff conversed discreetly behind Naomi's back. Some deemed her desperate, others unstable. "She lost her child," one remarked, suggesting she might be attempting to replace him. These words inflicted sharp pain, yet Naomi remained silent. In his study that evening, David sat with his head buried in his hands. The phone on his desk rang, connecting him with Patricia Green, a wealthy resident known for her sharp tongue. "David, dear," she began sweetly, "I've heard about the recent unfortunate events. You must be cautious. Individuals like her can become volatile after a loss. People are beginning to talk." David tightened his jaw, forcing himself to maintain composure. "Patricia, please, this is a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," she echoed with a slight laugh. "She nursed your child, as if she were his own mother. That's hardly a trivial matter, David. For the sake of your reputation, let her go before things escalate." The call concluded, but her words lingered. That night, David stood by his study window, observing the rain streak down the glass. He thought of his late wife, her gentle voice, and the way she used to hum little melodies when Noah moved within her. He then considered Naomi, quietly weeping while cradling his infant son. A part of him wished to believe she harbored no ill intentions. However, the world he inhabited was unforgiving, where appearances held more sway than truth. The following morning, Naomi was summoned to the study, her steps heavy and her heart filled with foreboding. David sat behind his expansive desk, his face ashen. "Naomi," he began softly, "you've been good to my son, and I'm appreciative, but what transpired cannot be overlooked." Naomi's throat constricted. Quote 2. Quote 3. David interjected quickly, his eyes softening. Quote 4. Tears welled in Naomi's eyes. "Do you believe I am a threat?" David averted his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. "No, but this situation has gone too far. Please, allow me to stay until you find a replacement," she pleaded. "No one knows me. He won't eat without me." Quote 1. I am truly sorry, Naomi. Quote, "Go on. You are dismissed." Quote 3. Please, sir. Quote, "Just let me say goodbye to him." Quote 5. "No, it's best if you don't. He will forget in time." Quote 6. "He won't forget," she said softly. "Children remember love even when adults pretend not to." The door clicked shut behind her. That night, the mansion felt more desolate than ever. Noah cried anew, the sound resonating through the corridors as it had on that first night. David rushed to the nursery, holding his son. But, despite his efforts to rock and sing, the cries intensified. The baby turned away from the bottle, seeking a comfort that had vanished. David slumped into an armchair, weariness etched in his eyes. "Please, Noah, stop crying," he implored, but the child did not cease. Outside, rain slicked the windows as if the heavens themselves were weeping. Inside, a billionaire and his son sat in darkness, both adrift in their own form of despair. One yearned for a mother's touch he never knew, while the other missed the woman who had revealed to him the true meaning of love. The morning sun barely penetrated the windows of the Miller mansion, a place meant to embody comfort and security. Instead, silence and sorrow permeated every room. Baby Noah's cries had persisted unabated since Naomi Clark's departure. His small voice grew tired, his breaths shallow, and his tiny hands habitually reached for someone no longer present. David Miller remained in the nursery, dark circles under his eyes, his shirt rumpled, his heart shattered. He had not slept, not for a single moment. The bottle lay abandoned nearby, its milk growing cold. Quote, 1. He murmured softly, attempting to guide the nipple towards his son's lips, but the infant turned away, his cries dissolving into pained gasps. David gently cradled him, pacing slowly across the floor, but his efforts proved futile. "It's all right, my boy. Daddy's here," he said, the words feeling hollow. He recalled the night he dismissed Naomi, the tears in her eyes, her voice saying, "Children remember love, even when adults pretend not to." Those words reverberated in his mind, growing louder with each passing minute. His son refused to eat. Amber Lewis entered the room, her expression weary, her perfume a heavy veil masking her culp shikashi. "It's just a phase," she declared with a shrug. "Babies do that sometimes." David turned to her, anger flashing through his exhaustion. "A phase? He hasn't eaten properly in 2 days." Amber recoiled slightly. "Perhaps he simply needs time. I'll try again later." She departed swiftly, leaving David alone once more with his son. Noah's cries softened, not from contentment, but from sheer weakness. David's throat tightened as he held the tiny form close, acutely aware of its fragility. He pressed his lips to the baby's forehead and whispered, "I'm sorry, son. I failed you." Later that evening, David summoned a doctor. A woman in her 40s arrived, her voice gentle but her expression serious. She examined Noah meticulously, her stethoscope cool against the baby's frail chest. Looking up, her eyes conveyed deep concern. "Mr. Miller, physically, your son appears to be well. However, this is not solely a physical matter. It is emotional." David frowned. "Emotional? He's just a baby." She nodded slowly. "Even infants form attachments. If that bond is severed abruptly, they can lose the will to eat or sleep. It's known as emotional separation trauma. He is grieving, much like an adult would." David's heart sank. "Grieving?" "Yes," the doctor confirmed quietly. "It appears your son has lost someone he deeply trusted." Her words struck him with the force of a tidal wave. He knew precisely who she meant. Staring at the floor, guilt gnawed at him. "If I bring her back," he asked softly, "will he recover?" The doctor sighed. "If the bond is that profound, she may be the only one capable of reaching him again." After she departed, David remained in silent contemplation for a considerable period. He gazed at the crib where Noah lay, his breathing shallow. The mansion felt vast, unnervingly quiet, and profoundly empty. Every nook and cranny served as a reminder of his actions. 2 days elapsed, and Noah's condition deteriorated. He was admitted to the city hospital, where medical professionals placed him under specialized care. Machines beeped beside his small body. Tubes delivered milk that he continued to refuse. David stood at the side of the hospital bed, grasping his son's tiny hand, as tears he had held back for months finally began to fall. "I thought I was protecting you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "But all I did was deprive you of the one person who made you feel secure." At that moment, everything he had strived for, wealth, power, pride, became utterly meaningless. None of it could save his son. Back at the mansion, Amber quietly packed her belongings. Her hands trembled as she folded her expensive attire into her suitcase. The guilt she had suppressed for weeks was now too heavy to conceal. That afternoon, as David returned home to collect some items, he overheard voices near the garden. Curiously, he moved closer and observed Amber handing a box of Noah's medication to a man in a black jacket. "This one's valuable," she whispered. "You'll make a good profit." David's heart lurched. He watched as the man discreetly passed money into her palm. His blood boiled. Without hesitation, he strode forward. "Amber!" Amber jumped, her face paling. The man fled. David snatched the box from her grasp. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice quivering with rage. "Mr. Miller, I can explain," she stammered. "Explain? You are selling my son's medicine?" His eyes blazed with fury and disbelief. Amber's lips trembled. "I needed money. My mother is ill. I only took a small amount." David stepped closer. "How long have you been stealing from me? How many times?" Amber dissolved into tears, collapsing onto her knees. "Please forgive me. I was jealous. All right. Jealous of her, Naomi. You trusted her more than me. I told everyone she was unstable, that she tried to replace your wife, but she was only helping your son. She saved him that night. I lied because I wanted her gone." David froze. Her words echoed like thunder within his mind. "She saved him," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Amber nodded, weeping more intensely. "Yes, she saved him. I fabricated everything." David stepped back, his heart pounding painfully, his hands trembling as the truth settled in. Naomi had done nothing wrong. She had risked everything to save his son, and he had cast her out onto the streets. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his vision blurred by tears. Within the mansion, the lights seemed dimmer, the air colder. He sat in his study, his hands clasped to his head. The image of Naomi standing in the rain, begging to say goodbye, replayed endlessly in his mind. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself, his voice shaking. "Dear God, what have I done?" That night, David was restless. He tried calling her number, but it was disconnected. He drove to her former apartment, but the landlady informed him she had departed weeks ago with little more than a small bag. "Didn't she say where she was going?" he asked desperately. The woman shook her head. "No, sir." She appeared fatigued, as if she hadn't eaten in days. David thanked her and departed, but inwardly he was disintegrating. He spent the night driving through the streets of New York, inquiring of everyone he encountered if they had seen a young black woman in a maid's uniform with tired eyes, but no one had. Hours bled into days. Noah remained hospitalized, growing weaker. The doctors cautioned that time was running out. David's once steady voice now cracked when he spoke. The guilt consumed him like an illness. On the fourth night, his phone rang. An old, raspy voice spoke on the other end. Quote, David's heart leaped. "Yes, please. Do you know her whereabouts?" "My name is Howard," the man stated slowly. "She used to reside with us beneath the bridge near Avenida. She is unwell. If you have concern for her, come with haste." David's breath hitched. Quote, "Or." He snatched his keys and coat, then plunged into the downpour outside. The rain drenched him entirely as he drove, his thoughts consumed by visions of Naomi's smile, her tears, and her voice saying, "He will never forget." Upon finally reaching the bridge, he parked his car and hurried into the shadows. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and sorrow. Beneath the bridge, he observed a small cluster of homeless individuals huddled together. And there, curled in a corner, was Naomi. Her face was ashen, her hair disheveled, her garments sodden from the rain, her frame appearing frail, as if the world had taken too much from her. David froze, rendered speechless. The sight of her in such a state shattered him utterly. "Naomi," he whispered, drawing nearer. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, her voice faint. "What are you doing here?" "I've come for you," he said softly. "Please, Naomi, come back with me. No one needs you. He is in the hospital. He is dying." Naomi turned her gaze away, her lips quivering. "I already saved him once, Mr. Miller, and you cast me aside. Why now?" David fell to his knees before her, tears streaming freely. "I was mistaken. I was blind. Please do not punish him for my error. He remembers you. He needs you." Naomi regarded him in silence. Her heart was torn between resentment and pity. The rain intensified. The wind felt cold against her skin. Slowly she nodded. "I will go, but only for the baby." David's tears mingled with the rain. "Thank you," he murmured. "Thank you." As they walked toward his car, Naomi faltered. David reached out, steadying her with a gentle touch. For the first time, his hand conveyed no authority or self-importance, only remorse and concern. The path ahead was dark and slick, yet, for the first time in a considerable period, David felt a faint spark of hope kindle within his heart. He offered a silent prayer that it would not extinguish again. The journey to the hospital was somber. The drumming of the rain on the car roof was the sole sound to break the stillness. Naomi Clark sat in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her clothes still damp, her body weak, but her spirit resolute. David Miller stole occasional glances at her, but each time their eyes met, she averted her gaze. The chasm of pain between them was too profound for words. Upon arriving at the hospital, nurses swiftly guided them through the corridors. The distinct aroma of medicine and disinfectant permeated the atmosphere. David's heart pounded in his chest as they approached the room. Through the glass, baby Noah lay small and motionless, tubes extending from his tiny form. His cheeks were pale, his chest rising and falling faintly. Naomi pressed her hand against the glass, her eyes welling with tears. Quote, she whispered softly. A nurse opened the door and nodded. Quote, one, she said. Naomi walked deliberately towards the crib. Her legs trembled with each step. She stooped, her fingers brushing against Noah's delicate hand. His skin felt cool. It's me, she whispered, her voice shaking. It's Naomi. I am here now. The infant stirred feebly, his eyes opening only slightly. For a fleeting moment, she believed she detected a flicker of recognition, but it vanished swiftly. Naomi turned to the nurse. Please, let me hold him. The nurse hesitated, then looked to David. He gave a quiet nod, his eyes already moist. Naomi carefully lifted Noah into her arms. The room fell silent as she cradled him close to her chest. She began to hum softly, the very lullaby she used to sing to her own child before his passing. Within moments, Noah's breathing stabilized. His tiny hand clutched the fabric of her dress. His lips moved weakly, and a faint sound escaped him, like a sigh of contentment. The physicians standing nearby exchanged glances of surprise. David stepped closer, watching with wide eyes as life seemed to return to his son. Tears traced paths down Naomi's cheeks as she murmured, "That's it, little one. It's all right now. You are safe." Quote, this is remarkable. Quote, 1. Sometimes a child simply requires the solace of the person they trust implicitly. Quote, 2. Naomi, I am indebted to you for my son's life. Naomi shook her head softly. You owe me nothing, Mr. Miller. I did not do it for you. I did it for him. Her words stung, yet he knew she spoke the truth. He nodded slowly, his throat too constricted to articulate. For a time, neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer cold, but laden with truth. The following morning, Noah was significantly improved. The nurses smiled as they monitored his vital signs. He is recovering faster than anticipated, one remarked. David entered the room with 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to Naomi. I understand you likely do not trust me, he said quietly, but I wish to rectify things. Naomi accepted the cup, her hands still trembling. What can you possibly do to make this right? She inquired. David studied her for a long moment. Tell the truth, he responded. That afternoon, David contacted his lawyer and arranged a press conference within the hospital itself. Reporters and cameras filled the lobby. Naomi stood in the background, uncertain whether she should even be present. David approached the microphone, his suit slightly rumpled, his eyes tired but resolute. I need to say something that I should have voiced weeks ago, he began. Naomi Clark saved my son's life. Every rumor you have heard about her is false. She is not what people have claimed. She is brave, selfless, and the reason my son is alive today. The room fell silent, save for the clicking of cameras. I made a mistake, he continued, his voice breaking subtly. I allowed arrogance and gossip to cloud my judgment. I failed to recognize her compassion, and for that, I will carry regret for the remainder of my days. Naomi stood motionless, tears streaming down her face as she listened. The words she had believed she would never hear were finally being spoken. By the conclusion of the conference, the story had disseminated widely. Those who had once whispered disparagingly behind Naomi's back now lauded her courage. Amber Lewis, the nanny who had fabricated the lies, lost her employment and vanished from public view. That evening, Naomi visited Noah one last time before departing. The infant slept peacefully. She offered a faint smile, lightly touching his small forehead. You will be all right now? she whispered. As she turned to leave, David stood by the door. "Naomi," he said softly. "Please, don't go." She paused, her back still to him. "I came for the baby, not for you," she replied quietly. "I know," he said. "But still, please remain, not as an employee, but as someone who belongs here." Naomi's breath hitched. "You believe you can erase everything that transpired?" "No," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "But I can endeavor to ensure it never happens again." She regarded him for a lengthy period, uncertain if she could ever place her trust in him again. Her heart yearned to stay, but her mind urged her to depart. "I will consider it," she finally whispered. David nodded, his eyes glistening. "That is all I ask." That night, for the first time in months, David sat beside Noah's crib as the infant slumbered. He glanced at the chair where Naomi had been seated earlier, her gentle voice still resonating in his memory. In the quietude of the hospital room, he finally comprehended that wealth could never mend what love could, and somewhere in her small rented room across town, Naomi lay awake, tears tracing paths down her face. Not from pain this time, but from the peculiar sensation that perhaps, just perhaps, life was affording her a second opportunity. The gentle morning light filtered through the hospital window, bathing the room in a serene glow. Baby Noah stirred softly in his crib, his cheeks no longer pale, his breathing steady and calm. Naomi Clark sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his blanket. It was the first morning in weeks that she had smiled without concealment. David Miller stood near the doorway, his hands in his pockets, observing the pair. The sight of Naomi humming softly to Noah filled his heart with sentiments he could not adequately articulate: gratitude, guilt, admiration, and something profound that frightened him because it felt like love. He moved closer, his voice soft. "The doctors indicate he can return home in a few days," he stated. Naomi nodded, her gaze still fixed on the infant. "That is welcome news," she whispered. David paused. "Naomi, I meant what I said yesterday. You are more than an employee to me. You are family now. If you would permit us to be your family too." Naomi turned to him, her eyes glistening. "Family," she repeated quietly, her voice trembling. "I once believed I had lost mine forever. My son, my home, my peace. I never imagined I would reclaim that." David stepped nearer. "You gave me back my son's life. The least I can do is ensure you never suffer again." Naomi shook her head slowly. "I do not require money, Mr. Miller. I simply desire peace." He looked down, his voice low. "Then allow me to assist you in finding it." Days elapsed, and Noah continued to gain strength. When it was finally time to depart the hospital, David extended an invitation for Naomi to return to the mansion. She paused for a moment, but upon seeing Noah reaching his small hands towards her, she found herself unable to decline. Back at the mansion, a palpable difference permeated the atmosphere. The same hallways that once resounded with quiet now echoed with a baby's gentle laughter. The same rooms that once felt chilly now seemed imbued with life. Naomi was no longer relegated to the status of a servant. David ensured she had her own quarters, her own personal space, and, most importantly, her dignity. Each morning, David joined her to care for Noah. Occasionally, their hands would brush while exchanging the baby bottle, eliciting a small, quiet smile between them. Naomi's heart gradually softened. Despite her efforts to conceal it, the sting of betrayal lingered. However, the warmth in David's gaze began to erode the barriers she had erected around her heart. One evening, after Noah had been put to sleep, Naomi ventured into the garden. The air was tranquil, the sky ablaze with the fading hues of sunset. She settled onto a bench, closing her eyes briefly, allowing the cool breeze to caress her face. Unbeknownst to her, David emerged quietly from behind. "You used to tend to this garden," he murmured. "Now, it feels as though it has finally come alive." Naomi offered a faint smile. "I cared for it because it reminded me of home. My mother cultivated flowers by our window. After her passing, I vowed to nurture something, even if it were merely plants." David sat beside her. "You have sustained more than just plants, Naomi. You have rekindled the light in this household." She regarded him with a searching look, uncertain how to respond. "Sometimes I ponder why life compels individuals to connect through sorrow," she stated softly. Perhaps it is so we can recognize love when it finally appears. David's heart ached at her words. He reached into his pocket and produced a small box. Naomi's expression shifted to one of surprise. He opened it deliberately. Within lay a simple silver ring. "Naomi," he began gently, "I committed the gravest error of my life when I allowed you to leave that night. I misjudged you when you were the only one who genuinely cared. You rescued my son when I was incapable of rescuing myself. I do not wish to lose you again." Naomi stood frozen, her hands trembling. "Mr. Miller, what are you implying?" He met her gaze with unwavering eyes. "I am saying that I love you, not solely because you saved my child, but because you also salvaged me. You demonstrated that love transcends material wealth. It is embodied in kindness, sacrifice, and truth. You are the missing element in this home," he implored. "Please, Naomi, will you permit me to devote my life to proving this to you?" Tears streamed down Naomi's cheeks. She glanced at the ring, then at David, and finally towards the illuminated nursery window where Noah slept. Her heart felt both burdened and strangely buoyant. "I am uncertain if I am prepared," she whispered. "I have been shattered for so long." David gently reached out, taking her hand. "Then, allow me to aid in your recovery, one day at a time." For a considerable period, Naomi remained silent. The wind rustled softly through the trees, carrying the fragrance of roses. Eventually, she nodded slowly. "If this is genuine, if it is not mere pity, then yes." David, his eyes moist, smiled and slid the ring onto her finger. Naomi covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. He reached for her, drawing her into a tender embrace. "You are no longer alone," he whispered. From the window above, baby Noah stirred in his crib and made a soft sound, as if sensing that something beautiful had just begun. Months elapsed, and the Miller mansion ceased to be a place of sorrow. Laughter returned, meals were shared, and the sound of Noah's tiny footsteps began to reverberate through the halls. Naomi often sat in the living room, reading to him while David worked nearby, observing them both with quiet contentment. One sunny afternoon, David took Naomi and Noah to the park. They spread a small blanket on the grass, enjoying pastries and shared laughter. Noah toddled around gleefully, his little arms outstretched towards the heavens. Naomi chuckled as he stumbled into her embrace. David sat beside them, his eyes brimming with warmth. Quote, "Yes," he said softly. Naomi looked at him inquisitively. Quote, "1, quote, 2, he replied. Quote, she smiled, her eyes again welling with tears, but this time they were tears of peace, not despair. As the sun descended, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Naomi rested her head on David's shoulder. Noah slept soundly between them, swaddled in a soft blue blanket. David whispered, "This is what home feels like." Naomi closed her eyes, her voice barely audible. "Yes, this is home." And there, bathed in the golden evening light, a broken heart found solace. A grieving father discovered love, and a young boy found the family he was always destined to have. Dear viewers, this narrative serves as a reminder that love can often find us in the most unforeseen circumstances. It teaches us that genuine family is forged not by lineage alone, but by compassion, forgiveness, and the fortitude to perceive the good within others. Naomi lost everything. Yet, her kindness rescued a child and mended a broken heart. David possessed immense wealth, but it was the affection of a humble nanny that reintroduced warmth into his life. If this story resonated with you, please share in the comments where you are watching from and what lesson you gleaned from it. Your words encourage us to continue sharing narratives that touch souls and remind the world of what truly matters. Kindly remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that love possesses the power to heal even the deepest wounds. For more emotionally stirring stories, comment "more stories" below, and you will be among the first to receive our next profoundly touching release. Now, please tell us in the comments. 1. What segment of this story evoked emotion in you? 2. Do you believe forgiveness can pave the way for new beginnings? 3. If you were in Naomi's position, would you have acted similarly for the baby? Your responses will assist us in understanding what love signifies to you.